Hana sat at her console in the Seoul Station Communications Center, watching the quiet flow of data across her screens. It was a normal night shift, the kind where nothing happened and time moved slowly. She sipped her coffee and checked the outer rim frequencies one more time. That's when everything changed. The signal came through weak and broken, filled with static and strange sounds. Hana leaned forward, adjusting the filters. As the audio cleared, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Screaming, crying, the sounds of weapons fire and explosions. "This is Velin Prime calling anyone who can hear us," a voice said in broken English. "We are dying. They are killing us all. Please, someone help us." Hana's hands moved fast across her keyboard. She recorded the transmission and sent an immediate alert to her supervisor. Within minutes, the entire command center was awake and active. Officers rushed to their stations, screens lit up with data. Admiral Tai Yang arrived 30 minutes later, still buttoning his uniform jacket. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many wars. He stood behind Hana's chair and listened to the recording 3 times without speaking. "What do we know about the Velin?" he asked finally. "Peaceful species, sir," Hana replied, pulling up files on her screen. "They farm and trade. No military to speak of. They have 4 planets in the outer rim. We've had limited contact with them over the past 20 years. "Show me the visual feed," Taeyang said quietly. Hana hesitated. She had already watched it once. It was not something she wanted to see again. But she obeyed and played the video file that came with the distress signal. The screen showed chaos. A city was burning. Strange black ships hung in the sky like massive insects. Smaller creatures swarmed through the streets, moving on too many legs. They caught people and dragged them toward pulsing organic structures that looked like tumors growing on the buildings. The Velin people ran and screamed, but there was nowhere to go. One scene made Hana turn away. A Velin mother was putting her child into a small escape pod. The mother was crying, touching her child's face one last time. Then she launched the pod into space and turned to face the creatures coming toward her. The video cut off. "Who's attacking them?" asked Commander Boknam, the station's tactical officer. "They call themselves the Krillax," Hana said, reading from the translation notes. "The Velin say they're a hive mind. They consume entire civilizations. They take hosts and use their bodies. Nothing stops them." Taeyang watched the video loop again. His jaw was tight. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Ask them what they're doing about this." The response came back in less than an hour. Hana read it aloud, her voice flat with disbelief. "The Council says the Velin situation falls under natural galactic cycles. They cite resource constraints and non-interference protocols. They voted not to intervene." The command center went silent. Officers looked at each other in shock. "Natural cycles?" Taeyang repeated slowly. "They're calling genocide a natural cycle?" "That's what they're saying, sir," Hana confirmed. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared. A ship had just dropped out of FTL near the station. It was Velin in design but badly damaged. Hull breaches leaked atmosphere. Weapons fire had carved deep gouges in the metal. "They're requesting emergency docking," Hana reported. "1 life sign aboard." "Grant it," Taeyang ordered. "I want a medical team ready." They brought the survivor to the command center an hour later. His name was Theron, and he had been the Velin ambassador to the Council. He was thin and gray-skinned, with large eyes that seemed too big for his face. Those eyes were filled with horror. Theron could barely stand. Burns covered his arms. One of his legs dragged uselessly, but he pushed away the doctors and grabbed Taeyang's uniform with desperate strength. "Please," Theron begged, "please help us. The Council abandoned us. They watched us die and did nothing. You're our last hope. I saw your species' history. You fight. You protect. Please, I'm begging you." "How bad is it?" Taeyang asked gently. Theron's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks. 3 billion dead in the first week. They took Velrus 2 completely. Everyone there is gone. Velrus 4 is under siege. Our homeworld. They're in our cities now. We launched every escape pod we had toward human space. Our children. We sent our children to you because we knew we couldn't save them." He pulled out a data chip with a shaking hand. "This has everything. Our defense data, the Krillax tactics, footage from every planet. Show your leaders, make them understand." Hana took the chip and loaded it into the secure system. What played next would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. They saw cities fall. They saw the Krillax swarm over defenders who fought with farming tools because they had no real weapons. They saw parents making impossible choices, deciding which child to put in the last escape pod. They saw the Krillax taking people alive, dragging them into their organic ships where something worse than death waited. One clip showed a Velin school. The children were singing, trying to stay calm while their teachers barricaded the doors. The Krillax broke through. The video went dark. Taeyang watched all of it. 2 hours of footage. His expression never changed, but his hands gripped the edge of the console so hard his knuckles turned white. When it ended, the command center was absolutely silent. Several officers were crying. Hana had her hand over her mouth. Theron sat on the floor, too exhausted to stand anymore. Taeyang straightened slowly. He looked at his officers one by one. Then he looked at the star map showing Velrin's space, where billions were dying while the galaxy looked away. "Mobilize," he said. The single word hung in the air. "Sir?" Commander Boknam asked carefully. "Mobilize what?" Taeyang turned to face his team. His tired eyes were now hard as steel. "Everything. Every ship. Every soldier. Every weapon we have. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need the full fleet. Tell them why." "The Council said not to interfere," Hana reminded him quietly. "I don't work for the Council," Taeyang replied. "I work for humanity, and humanity doesn't abandon children." He looked down at Theron. "We're coming. Tell your people to hold on. We're coming." Theron started sobbing. Not from despair this time, but from hope. The first hope his species had felt in weeks. Hana sent the messages to Earth, while Taeyang made calls to every fleet commander he knew. The response from Earth would take hours to arrive. But Hana already knew what it would say. She had worked with humans long enough to know this truth. When someone cried for help, humanity answered. Not with politics, not with debate, with fury. The message from Sol Station reached Earth at dawn. Within an hour, every news channel in human space was showing the footage from Velrin worlds. People watched their breakfast broadcasts and saw children dying. They saw cities burning. They saw desperation and horror. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. President Soha was in an emergency session with the United Earth Assembly when the Galactic Council's official response arrived. A hologram of Council Speaker Velmith appeared, his 3 eyes blinking in what his species considered a calming gesture. "President Soha, we understand Earth is considering military action in the Velrin situation," Velmith said smoothly. "We strongly advise against this. The Krillax are an established species. Interfering could destabilize the entire region. We must think about the bigger picture." Soha stood slowly. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair, a former colony governor who had spent 20 years protecting frontier settlements. She looked at the hologram with undisguised contempt. "The bigger picture?" she repeated. "I've seen your bigger picture, Speaker. It's 3 billion corpses and counting. Where's your bigger picture for them?" "The resources required would be enormous," Velmith argued. "The cost in lives and materials. Surely Earth cannot afford such waste on a species you barely know." "Waste," Soha said the word like it was poison. You call saving children waste. We call it impractical, Velmith corrected. Earth is still a young species. You don't understand how the galaxy works. Sometimes we must make hard choices. Sometimes species fall. It's the natural order. Soha leaned forward, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Let me tell you how humanity works, Speaker. When children cry for help, we don't calculate costs. We don't debate natural order. We act. That's our nature. If you have a problem with it, you can enforce your sanctions and send your protests. We'll be too busy saving lives to care. She cut the connection before Velmith could respond. The assembly voted within the hour. The vote was unanimous. Every representative voted yes. Some voted with tears in their eyes. Others voted with rage in their voices. But they all voted the same way. Earth would go to war. Fleet Commander Jiho received his orders at noon. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Righteous Fury, and read them twice to make sure he understood correctly. He was being given command of 400 warships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. His second-in-command, Captain Minho, stood beside him. Minho was younger, with sharp eyes and a scar across his left cheek from a pirate raid that had killed his wife and daughter 5 years ago. He looked at the orders and smiled grimly. 400 ships, Minho said. They're really letting us go all out. Read the last line, Jiho told him. Minho did. His eyes widened. Rules of engagement, commander's discretion, no restrictions. He looked up. They're giving you free rein? They're telling us to do whatever it takes, Jiho corrected. The politicians will deal with the council. We deal with the Krillax. Below them in the shipyard, something unprecedented was happening. Engineer Yuna and her team were working on civilian vessels, cargo haulers, and passenger ships that had volunteered to join the fleet. Yuna was a small woman with quick hands and quicker mind. She was converting cargo holds into troop transports and welding weapon mounts onto ships never designed for war. Will this work? Asked her assistant, a young man named Junho, who looked doubtful at their modifications. It doesn't have to work pretty, Yuna said, not looking up from her welding torch. It just has to get our people to the fight. These merchants and traders, they're giving up their livelihoods to help. We're going to make sure their sacrifice means something. Across human space, the mobilization continued at a pace that shocked the galaxy. Retired soldiers reported to duty stations. Factory workers signed up as Marines. Medical staff volunteered for combat duty. Ships that had been mothballed for decades were pulled from storage and refitted in record time. The Galactic Council sent another message. This time, it was a threat. Economic sanctions, trade restrictions, possible expulsion from the Council itself. Soha read it during a live broadcast. Then she tore it in half. Let them sanction us, she said to the cameras, to her people, to the galaxy watching. Let them cut their trade. We'll survive. The Velin won't survive without us. And when this is over, when we've saved those people, the galaxy can judge us all they want. We'll sleep well knowing we did the right thing. The broadcast went viral. Within hours, 43 other species sent quiet messages to Earth. Small species, weak species, the ones the Council ignored. They all said the same thing. Thank you for showing there's still courage in the galaxy. In the Sol Station Command Center, Hana coordinated the massive fleet gathering. Ships arrived from every corner of human space. Military vessels with proud battle histories, corporate security ships, private yachts converted into scout craft. They all came. Admiral Taeyang watched them assemble on the tactical display, thousands of ships, not just the 400 warships, support vessels, medical ships, transports to carry refugees. Humanity wasn't just sending an army. They were sending a rescue mission. The Council is calling this madness, Commander Boknum told him. They're saying we're going to start a galactic war. Maybe we are, Taeyang replied calmly. But we're going to save the Velin first. The politics can wait. Theron, the Velin ambassador, was recovering in the station's medical bay. He watched the fleet assemble through his window, barely able to believe what he was seeing. A nurse checked his monitors and smiled. "Your people are lucky," she said. "Why?" Theron asked, his voice still weak. "Because you asked humans for help," the nurse replied. "We're not always the smartest species. We're not the strongest or the fastest. But when someone needs help, when children are in danger, we become something else entirely." The final ship to join the fleet was the carrier Indomitable, captained by Minho. It was the newest and most powerful carrier in the fleet, carrying 200 fighter craft. Minho brought it into formation beside Jiho's flagship. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Jiho opened a channel to all ships, 400 warships and another 1,000 support vessels, nearly 2 million humans, all volunteering to fight for a species most of them had never heard of a week ago. "This is Fleet Commander Jiho to all vessels," he began. "You know our mission. The Velin are dying. The galaxy has turned its back on them. But humanity doesn't turn away. We don't abandon the innocent. We don't let children die while we calculate costs." He paused, looking at his crew. Every face was determined. "The Krillax think they can consume whoever they want. The Council thinks we'll follow their rules. They're both wrong. We're going to show them what happens when they threaten the defenseless. We're going to show them what humanity does when someone cries for help." He raised his hand. "All ships, jump to FTL on my mark. Destination, Velin space, 3, 2, 1, mark." The fleet jumped. 400 warships and 1,000 support vessels tore holes in space and disappeared, heading toward a war zone the galaxy had written off. On Earth, Soha watched them go. She stood in her office, alone, looking at the stars. She knew many of those ships wouldn't come back. She knew the Council would make her pay for this decision. She knew the economic consequences would hurt Earth for years. She didn't care. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ma'am, the Council is demanding a response to their sanctions threat." Soha didn't turn from the window. "Tell them we're busy. Tell them we'll talk after we've saved the Velin. Tell them—" She smiled coldly. "Tell them humanity has priorities, and their politics aren't one of them. In Velin space, on the dying world of Velris IV, a mother held her child and told him stories about the stars, about species that traveled between them, about hope. She didn't know that hope was coming. She didn't know that 2 million humans were crossing the galaxy at faster than light speed, bringing guns and fury and an unshakable conviction that some things were worth fighting for. She didn't know that in 3 days, everything would change. But she would learn. The human fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Velris IV system. What they saw made even the veterans go silent. The planet was dying. Black Krillax ships surrounded it like a swarm of insects around a corpse. Hundreds of them, ranging from small fighters to massive bio-cruisers the size of cities. The ships weren't metal. They were organic, pulsing and writhing like living things. They attached themselves to the planet's surface and fed. "Mother of God," Captain Minho whispered on the Indomitable's bridge. Fleet Commander Jiho stood calmly, studying the enemy formation. His tactical officers were running scans, their faces pale as they read the results. "Sir, we're detecting massive life signs on the surface," reported the sensor officer. "Millions of Velin are still alive down there, but the Krillax they're processing them, taking them into those structures." "Processing?" Jiho asked, though he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. The officer swallowed hard. "They're taking hosts, sir, using Velin bodies to grow more Krillax. It's a feeding process." On the tactical display, the Krillax ships continued their work, ignoring the human fleet completely. They didn't even seem to notice 400 warships had just arrived. "They don't see us as a threat," Minho observed. "Then let's educate them," Jiho replied coldly. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships, battle formation. Marines, prepare for ground assault. We're going in hot. Target priority. Those processing structures. Burn them off the planet. Sir, shouldn't we wait for reconnaissance? His tactical officer asked nervously. Those are people dying down there, Jiho said flatly. Every second we wait, more of them die. We go now. The human fleet surged forward. 400 warships opened fire as one. Missiles and energy weapons tore into the Krillax formation. The first wave of fire destroyed dozens of smaller bioships, the explosions blooming like flowers against the darkness. The Krillax finally noticed them. The bioships peeled away from the planet, organic hulls rippling as they moved. They were fast, unnaturally fast. They swarmed toward the human fleet like angry hornets. "Evasive action!" Minho ordered on his ship as 3 Krillax fighters targeted the Indomitable. His pilot, a young woman named Doyun, rolled the massive carrier with impossible grace. The Krillax ships missed, their bioweapons splashing against empty space. "I've got them," Doyun said calmly. She brought the carrier around and its point defense systems shredded the enemy fighters. But she was already frowning. "Sir, did you see that? Those ships we hit earlier, they're regenerating." Minho pulled up the tactical feed. She was right. Krillax bioships that had been heavily damaged were healing, their organic hulls growing back over the wounds. Not fast, but fast enough to be a problem. "They can heal?" Minho cursed. "Commander Jiho, we have a problem." But Jiho was already dealing with bigger issues. The main Krillax force had engaged the fleet, and they were adapting. Energy weapons that had worked perfectly in the first minute were becoming less effective. The Krillax hulls were changing, absorbing the damage differently. "They're learning from us," his tactical officer reported. "Every weapon we use, they adapt to counter it. Then we'll teach them faster than they can learn," Jiho growled. "All ships, randomize weapon patterns. Don't give them time to adapt, and get our Marines down there now." Marine Commander Hyun was already in his drop pod, ready to launch. He was a big man with scars on his face and hands that had seen too many battles. Behind him, 5,000 Marines waited in their pods, weapons ready. "This is going to be bad," his second-in-command said over the comm. "Probably," Hyun agreed. "But there are civilians down there, kids. That's all that matters." The drop pods launched, falling through the atmosphere like meteors. Krillax fighters tried to intercept them, but the human pilots, led by Doyun in her smaller fighter craft, flew cover. They wove through enemy fire, taking hits but making sure the Marines reached the ground. Hyun's pod hit hard. He kicked the door open and rolled out, rifle up. What he saw made him understand why the Galactic Council had run away. The Krillax drones were nightmares made real. They walked on 6 legs, their bodies covered in black chitin. Their heads were eyeless, sensing through some other method. And they were everywhere. Thousands of them, moving through the ruined city, dragging Velin people toward massive organic towers that pulsed like beating hearts. "Open fire!" Hyun roared. 5,000 Marines opened up. The sound was deafening. Bullets and energy blasts tore into the Krillax swarm. Drones fell by the dozens, but there were so many, and they didn't stop. Even wounded, even dying, they kept coming. A group of Velin civilians was trapped in a collapsed building. Hyun could see them through a gap in the rubble, a family. Parents and 3 children huddled together in terror as Krillax drones climbed over the debris toward them. "Squad 3 with me!" Hyun charged forward, firing as he ran. His squad followed without hesitation. They threw themselves into close combat with the Krillax, using knives and rifle butts when the drones got too close. Hyun personally killed 4 of them, his enhanced strength letting him tear through chitin with his bare hands when his rifle ran empty. He reached the family and pulled them out, shoving them toward the evacuation zone his Marines were securing. "Run!" he shouted at them. "Go! We've got this!" The battle raged for hours. In orbit, the fleet fought desperately against Krillax bioships that just wouldn't die. On the ground, Marines held defensive lines while evacuation shuttles loaded refugees. Dr. Suji set up a field hospital in what used to be a school. She was young for a combat medic, barely 30, but her hands were steady as she treated both human and Velin wounded. The injuries she saw were horrible. Burns from Krillax bioweapons, wounds where drones had tried to implant something in their victims. "We need more medical supplies," she shouted to her team, "and more hands. These people are dying." A Velin child was brought in, barely breathing. Suji worked on him for 20 minutes, refusing to give up. When his eyes finally opened and he gasped for air, she allowed herself a tiny smile. Then she moved to the next patient. There was always another patient. In space, Captain Minho made a decision that would haunt him forever. The Krillax had brought up their heavy ships, massive biocraft that dwarfed even the human dreadnoughts. One of them was moving toward the evacuation zone, its weapons charging. If it fired, thousands of refugees would die. The Indomitable was already damaged, holes in the hull, systems failing. But it was fast, the fastest carrier in the fleet. Minho looked at his crew. They looked back. They all knew what he was thinking. "Evacuate," he ordered calmly. "All hands to escape pods. You have 2 minutes." "Sir," his first officer stammered. "What are you—" "That thing is going to kill our people on the ground," Minho said quietly. "I'm not letting that happen. Now go. That's an order." They went. All except Pilot Do-yoon, who locked her controls and turned to face him. "You'll need a pilot," she said. "Do-yoon," Minho began. "Sir, with respect, shut up and let me do my job," she said, already bringing the dying carrier around. "Let's make this count." They accelerated. The massive carrier picked up speed, heading straight for the Krillax hive ship. The enemy tried to shoot them down, but the Indomitable was too fast, too determined. At the last second, Minho activated the self-destruct. The explosion lit up the entire system. The carrier and the hive ship died together in a flash of fusion fire. 3,000 Krillax drones on the ground died instantly as their hive connections severed. The evacuation zone was saved. On his flagship, Ji-ho watched it happen. His hand was pressed flat against the console, knuckles white. He had just lost one of his best captains and one of his best pilots. 2 people who should have had long lives ahead of them, but 6,000 refugees were boarding shuttles safely because of them. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're receiving a signal from the planet. Commander Hyun says the evacuation is nearly complete. He's requesting pickup in 20 minutes. Ji-ho nodded slowly. "All ships, prepare to cover the retreat. And—" He paused, his voice rough. "Add Captain Minho and Pilot Do-yoon to the honor roll. They died saving thousands." On the ground, Hyun held the perimeter for those final 20 minutes. His Marines formed a wall of flesh and steel, refusing to break even when the Krillax threw everything at them. When the last shuttle lifted off, Hyun counted his people. They had started with 5,000 Marines. 3,800 were getting on the shuttles. The rest stayed behind, buying time with their lives. As the human fleet pulled back, the Krillax suddenly stopped pursuing. Their ships regrouped, pulling into a defensive formation. "They're communicating," the communications officer reported. "Long-range signals. They're calling for help." "Good," Ji-ho said coldly. "Let them know we're coming. Let them know humanity is in this fight now." The fleet jumped to FTL, carrying 2 million Velin refugees to safety. Behind them, Velris 4 was still in Krillax's hands. But something had changed. For the first time in their long history, the Krillax had met a species that fought back harder than they did. A species that valued other lives more than their own. They didn't understand it, but they feared it. And fear was something the Krillax had never felt before. The human fleet regrouped at a temporary base in neutral space. Ships were being repaired, wounded were being treated, and Fleet Commander Jiho was making a decision that would change everything. "They regenerate," he said, standing over a tactical table with his senior officers. "They adapt to our weapons. Conventional warfare isn't going to work. We need to stop playing by the galaxy's rules." Admiral Tae Yang had arrived from Seoul Station to take direct command. He looked older now, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. He brought with him sealed orders from President Soha. "These are Protocol Inferno authorization codes," Tae Yang said, sliding a data chip across the table. "They unlock weapons banned by galactic law, bioweapons, atmospheric incendiaries, quantum destabilizers, things we promised we'd never use. And now we're using them on the Krillax," Jiho finished. "The Council will never forgive us," warned Commander Boknam. "The Council watched billions die and did nothing," Tae Yang replied flatly. "I don't care about their forgiveness. I care about saving the Velin. If that means we become the villains in the galaxy's eyes, so be it." Engineer Yuna was already working on the new weapons systems. She had barely slept in 3 days, surviving on coffee and determination. Her team worked around her, retrofitting ships with weapons that had been locked away in the darkest arsenals. "These Scorcher missiles," she explained to Jiho when he visited her workshop, "they'll superheat an entire atmosphere, burn the oxygen away. Krillax bioships need to breathe just like anything else. We take away their air, they die. Simple." "And anything else in that atmosphere dies too," Jiho said quietly. "The Velin are already evacuated from the target zones," Yuna replied without looking up from her work. "We made sure of that. This is precise, controlled, not like what the Krillax do." Jiho nodded. The difference mattered. Humans were choosing violence to protect life. The Krillax chose violence for consumption. There was a moral line there, even if it was thin. Dr. Suji had a different approach. She had been studying the dead Krillax drones from the battle. Her medical bay had become part laboratory, filled with alien corpses and analysis equipment. "I found something," she told Hyun when he came to check on her. The Marine commander looked like he hadn't slept either. Burns covered his arms from close combat with Krillax weapons. "What?" he asked. Suji pulled up a microscope view on her screen. "The Krillax hive mind works through biological signals, chemical markers in their blood. I've synthesized something that disrupts it. A toxin. We introduce it into their systems and they lose coordination. They become confused, aggressive toward each other." "You made a bioweapon," Hyun said. "I made a tool," Suji corrected sharply. "A tool to save lives. Is it any different from the bullets in your rifle?" Hyun didn't answer. He wasn't sure there was a good answer. The fleet moved on Velin Prime, the homeworld. It was the most important target. 3 billion Velin had lived there before the invasion. Intelligence said at least half were still alive, being processed slowly by the Krillax. The battle for Velin Prime would last 2 weeks. It was brutal from the first moment. The Krillax had fortified the planet heavily. Massive hive structures covered the major cities. Bioships filled the orbital space. They had expected the humans to come and prepared accordingly. They hadn't expected what humanity brought. The first wave was the Scorcher missiles. Yuna watched from her station as they deployed. 50 missiles, each targeting a different hive zone. They detonated in the upper atmosphere, creating thermal cascades that burned through the air itself. Krillax bioships screamed. It was the only word for it. A horrible sound that came through the radio, even though they shouldn't have been able to make noise in space. They writhed and died as their biological systems shut down from the heat and lack of oxygen. "It's working," Yuna whispered, watching the tactical display. Hundreds of enemy ships dying. But she felt sick. Killing, even when necessary, wasn't something to celebrate. On the ground, Hyun and his Marines went in after the bombardment cleared. They found the hive structures damaged but still functioning. Krillax drones poured out, desperate and violent. "Use the toxin rounds," Hyun ordered. His Marines switched to special ammunition loaded with Suji's bioweapon. When the bullets hit Krillax drones, they didn't just wound, they infected. The drones began attacking each other. Their hive mind signals scrambled. They lost all coordination and became wild animals, tearing at anything near them, including other Krillax. It was horrifying to watch, but it worked. Hyun's forces pushed deeper into the city. They found processing chambers where Krillax had been converting Velin into hosts. The sight made hardened Marines vomit, but they kept going. They burned every chamber they found. They killed every Krillax. They showed no mercy because mercy felt obscene in the face of what they'd seen. In orbit, Admiral Taeyang made his own terrible choice. Intelligence had located the Krillax breeding nexus, the central hive where new Krillax were grown. It was in a massive structure on the dark side of Velin Prime's moon. If we destroy it, we cripple their ability to replace losses, the intelligence officer explained. But it's heavily defended. We'd lose a lot of ships. Taeyang looked at the projections. 40 ships would probably die in the assault. Maybe more. That was 4,000 lives minimum. But if they didn't destroy it, the Krillax would keep coming, keep consuming, keep taking hosts. "Prepare the assault force," Taeyang ordered. "I'll lead it personally." "Sir, you don't need to," Boknam began. "Yes, I do," Taeyang interrupted. "I'm not ordering people to die while I stay safe. We go together or we don't go at all." The assault was everything the projections predicted. 42 ships died destroying the Nexus. Taeyang's own ship was crippled, barely limping away. But when the Nexus exploded, it took out the Krillax's ability to reinforce their losses. The tide began to turn. The Galactic Council sent observers. They arrived in neutral ships, watching from a distance. What they saw horrified them. Humans using banned weapons, deploying bioweapons, fighting with a ferocity that seemed unlimited. "They're monsters," one observer said. "They're saving the Velin," another replied quietly. "At what cost?" the first demanded. "Look at them. They're becoming as bad as the Krillax." The second observer pulled up footage of Hyun's Marines. The humans were exhausted, covered in wounds and blood, but they were carrying Velin children to safety, sharing their rations with refugees. One Marine was reading stories to a group of traumatized Velin kids, trying to help them sleep. "No," the second observer said. "They're not like the Krillax at all. The Krillax kill for food. Humans kill to protect. There's a difference." On the surface, Suji worked in field hospitals that never seemed to empty. She treated everyone, human and Velin alike. Her hands were steady even when her mind screamed. She had created weapons and now she healed the survivors. The contradiction didn't escape her. A young Velin girl was brought in, her body half converted by Krillax implants. Suji worked for 6 hours to remove them. When the girl finally opened her eyes and recognized her parents, Suji let herself cry for the first time in weeks. "Why are you sad?" the girl asked in broken English. "You saved me." "I'm not sad," Suji lied, wiping her tears. "I'm happy you're safe." The girl touched Suji's hand. "Thank you. Thank you for coming." And Suji knew, despite everything, despite the weapons she'd created and the moral lines she'd crossed, it was worth it. The battle for Velin Prime ended on the 14th day. The last Krillax hive structure fell. The last bioship retreated. Humans controlled the planet again. The cost was visible everywhere. Parts of cities were burned to ash. Thousands of Marines were dead. Dozens of ships destroyed. And the Velin themselves, even those saved, carried scars that would never fully heal. But they were alive. 5 billion Velin who would have died now had a future. Jiho stood in the ruins of what had been Velin Prime's capital city. Smoke still rose from burning Krillax structures. Around him, his Marines were helping Velin families find each other, reuniting children with parents who thought they'd lost them forever. A Velin elder approached him. She was old. Her gray skin wrinkled with age. She had lost half her family to the Krillax. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why did you come? Your people died for us. Why?" Jiho looked at her for a long moment. Then he pointed at a human Marine playing with Velin children, making them laugh for the first time in weeks. "Because that's what we do," he said. "When someone needs help, we help. It's not complicated." "But the cost," the elder began. "Was worth it," Jiho finished. "Every life we saved was worth it." From orbit, a transmission came in. It was from the Krillax overlord, the intelligence controlling the entire swarm. It had never communicated with prey before, but it spoke now. "You have won this battle, humans, but this is not over. We will return. We will bring our full might, and we will consume you along with these Velin you protect." Taeyang listened to the transmission from his damaged flagship. Then he sent a reply. "You're right. This isn't over. Because we're coming for you next. Every hive, every world, every piece of your swarm. We're going to hunt you down and burn you out of existence. Not because we hate you, but because you prey on the innocent, and humanity doesn't allow that." He cut the transmission. Around him, his crew was silent. They knew what was coming. More battles, more losses, more moral compromises. But they also knew they would face it. Because that was what humanity did. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves, no matter the cost. 6 months after the war ended, Hana stood in front of a wall made of black stone. Names were carved into it. Thousands of names. Every human who had died saving the Velin. She traced her fingers over one name in particular. Captain Minho, the man who had flown his carrier into a hive ship to save evacuation transports. She had never met him, but she felt like she knew him. His sacrifice had saved 6,000 lives. "He was a good man," a voice said behind her. Hana turned to find Admiral Taeyang. He looked older now, his hair completely white. The war had aged him decades in just months. "Did you know him well, sir?" Hana asked. "Well enough," Taeyang replied. "He lost his family to pirates 5 years ago, his wife and daughter. I think he saw the Velin children and remembered his own child. That's why he did it." They stood together in silence, reading the names. 67,000 names, 67,000 humans who would never go home. The wall stood in the center of what the Velin had named New Seoul, their rebuilt capital city. The Velin had insisted on building the memorial themselves. They wanted humanity to know their sacrifice would never be forgotten. "The Council is still demanding we answer for war crimes," Hana said after a while. "They sent another list of charges yesterday." Taeyang smiled bitterly. "Let them demand. We broke their rules to save lives. I'd do it again." The Galactic Council had officially censured Earth 3 months ago. Economic sanctions were in place. Human ships were banned from Council space. Dozens of species had cut diplomatic ties. The Council called humanity dangerous, unstable, a threat to galactic peace. President Soha had responded by tearing up Earth's Council charter during a live broadcast. The entire galaxy watched as she ripped the document in half and dropped it on the floor. "We don't need your council," she had said. "We don't need your approval. We saved 5 billion lives while you debated and calculated. Judge us all you want. History will remember who acted and who stood by." That broadcast had changed everything. Within days, 43 other species contacted Earth. Small species, weak species, the ones the Council ignored or bullied. They all said the same thing. "We want to stand with you." The Free Species Alliance was born from that, an alliance of the ignored and the protected, species who believed that saving lives mattered more than politics. Fleet Commander Jiho was now Supreme Commander of the Alliance military. He stood in his new headquarters on a station at the border of the Alliance territory. His staff was a mix of humans and aliens, all working together to build something new. "Sir, we've received 72 more applications for Alliance membership," his aide reported. "The species are getting bolder. They're not afraid of the Council anymore." "Good," Jiho said. "Fear kept them silent. It's about time they found their voices." His tactical display showed Alliance space. It wasn't large yet, but it was growing, and it was defended. The fleet wasn't as big as the Council's forces, but it was organized, motivated, and had learned hard lessons from the Krillax War. On Velin Prime, Commander Hyun was training the new Velin Defense Force. The Velin had asked him to stay and teach them how to fight. They never wanted to be helpless again. "Keep your stance wide," Hyun instructed a group of young Velin recruits. "Don't lock your knees, stay flexible." The recruits tried to copy his movements. They were clumsy, unused to military training, but they were determined. Every single one of them had lost family to the Krillax. They would never forget. They would never be unprepared again. After training, Hyun visited the trauma center that Dr. Suji had opened. It treated both human veterans and Velin survivors, PTSD cases, physical injuries that still needed care, children who woke up screaming every night. Suji had stayed behind when most of the fleet returned to Earth. She couldn't leave. Too many people still needed help. "How are you holding up?" Hyun asked her. Suji looked exhausted. Her hands had a slight tremor, something new since the war. "I keep seeing the processing chambers," she admitted quietly. "Every time I close my eyes." "I see what they did to people." "You saved thousands of lives," Hyun reminded her. "I also created weapons that killed thousands more," Suji countered. "I weaponized medicine. I crossed lines I swore I'd never cross." Hyun sat down beside her. He had scars all over his arms now, some from Krillax weapons, some from close combat. "We all crossed lines, but we did it to protect the innocent. That has to count for something." "Does it?" Suji asked. "The Council says we're monsters." "The Council let children die rather than risk political complications," Hyun replied firmly. "Their judgment means nothing to me." In the trauma center, a young Velin girl was being treated. She was one of the children Hyun had saved from that bunker on Velris 4. She recognized him and ran over, hugging his leg. "You came back," she said happily. Hyun picked her up, managing a smile. "I promised I would. How are you doing?" "Better," the girl said. "I don't have nightmares every night now, just sometimes." She showed him a drawing she had made. It was crude, done in crayon, but the image was clear. Humans in armor, standing between Velin children and dark monsters. "That's you," she explained, pointing at one armored figure. "You protected us. My mom says you're heroes." Hyun's throat tightened. He handed the girl to Suji and stepped outside, needing air. Heroes. They called humans heroes. But he remembered every Marine he'd lost. Every civilian he couldn't save, every terrible choice he'd made. The cost of being a hero was higher than anyone understood. Engineer Yuna had returned to Earth. She was working on defensive technologies now, preparing for the day the Krillax returned. Because they would return. Everyone knew it. She stood in her workshop surrounded by new weapons systems, better shields, more efficient power cores, faster engines. Everything humanity would need for the next war. "You should take a break," her assistant Junho said. He had been with her through the entire war, helping retrofit ships and develop new weapons. "Can't," Yuna replied, not looking up. "They're out there, the Krillax. They're regrouping, building their forces. We need to be ready." "We have time," Junho tried. "Do we?" Yuna asked sharply. The Velrin thought they had time. Look what happened to them. She was right, and they both knew it. Somewhere in deep space, the Krillax swarm was rebuilding, learning from their defeat, preparing for revenge. On Earth, a ceremony was being held. President Soha was posthumously awarding Captain Minho humanity's highest honor for his sacrifice. His carrier had been destroyed completely, but they had recovered his personal logs. His last words were being read aloud. "To anyone who finds this," the recording said in Minho's calm voice, "I want you to know I'm not scared. I'm sad that I won't see my daughter's face again, but I'm glad I can save others. 6,000 people will live because of what I do today. That's not a bad trade. Tell them I was happy to help." There wasn't a dry eye in the ceremony. Soha placed the medal on a memorial stand since there was no body to bury. Afterward, she met with her advisors. The sanctions were hurting Earth's economy. Trade had dropped 40%. Some colonies were struggling. "Should we try to negotiate with the council?" one advisor asked. "No," Soha said firmly. "We made our choice. We saved the Velrin. Everything that came after is just consequences. We accept them." "But the people are suffering," the advisor began. "The people know why we're suffering," Soha interrupted. "And every poll shows they support what we did. Humans understand sacrifice. We don't regret doing the right thing just because it's difficult." The advisor fell silent, because she was right. Despite the economic hardship, despite the diplomatic isolation, humanity stood by its choice. They would rather struggle with honor than prosper with shame. Ambassador Theron had made a full recovery. He served as the Velrin's representative to the Alliance. He spent his days building bridges between species, making sure the Alliance grew strong. But at night, he visited the memorial wall. He read the human names carved there. 67,000 people who had died saving his species. Strangers who had crossed the galaxy because someone asked for help. He would never understand it. The Velrin valued life. They were peaceful. But they wouldn't have done this for a species they didn't know. The scale of human compassion was beyond anything he had ever seen. "Why?" he asked the wall, like he did every night. "Why did you care so much?" A human janitor was working nearby. She heard his question and smiled sadly. "Because someone needed help," she said simply. "That's reason enough." 1 year after the war, the Free Species Alliance held its first summit. Representatives from 60 species gathered on the space station that served as Alliance headquarters. They came from all corners of the galaxy, small species, weak species, some who had been threatened by the Krillax, others who had been bullied by larger empires. They all came because humanity had shown them something, that protecting the innocent mattered more than political power, that saving lives was worth any cost. Fleet Commander Jiho gave the opening speech. He stood before the assembled representatives and spoke calmly. "We didn't create this alliance to challenge the Council," he began. "We created it to protect each other, to ensure that what happened to the Velrin never happens again. We're not warriors seeking glory. We're not politicians seeking power. We're just people who believe that when someone cries for help, you answer." The applause was thunderous. But in deep space, far from Alliance territory, the Krillax swarm was building. New hive ships, new weapons, new strategies. The Overlord had learned from its defeat. It had studied humans, their tactics, their psychology, their weaknesses. The Krillax were patient. They could wait decades, centuries. Time meant nothing to the swarm, but they would return. And when they did, they would bring total war. On Earth, Admiral Tai Yang watched the sunset from his retirement home. He had stepped down from active duty after the war, too old and too tired to continue. But he kept himself informed. He knew the Krillax would return. A message came through on his personal comm. It was from Fleet Commander Jiho. Admiral, we've detected unusual activity in the outer sectors. It might be nothing. But I wanted you to know, just in case. Taeyang closed his eyes. Not yet, he thought. Give us more time. But he knew time was running out. The galaxy was changing. Old alliances were breaking. New ones were forming. And somewhere in the darkness, the Krillax swarm prepared for revenge. Taeyang looked at a photo on his desk. His old crew. His old ship. Many of them were dead now. They had died saving the Velin. They had died believing it mattered. It did matter, Taeyang whispered to the photo. You made a difference. Rest well. The sun set. Night came. And in the darkness, both hope and threats grew in equal measure. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to fight for others. They had paid a terrible price. 67,000 lives, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, but they had saved 5 billion Velin. They had created an alliance of the weak and the ignored. They had changed the rules of a galaxy that had accepted cruelty as normal. And when the Krillax returned, when new threats emerged, humanity would be ready, not because they sought war, but because they understood a simple truth. When children cry for help, you answer. When innocents are threatened, you protect them. When evil rises, you stand against it, no matter the cost. That was humanity's legacy. That was their gift to the galaxy. And that was why, despite everything, the universe was a little bit safer. Because somewhere out there, humans were watching, preparing, ready to respond with unrelenting fury the moment someone reached out for help. The war had ended, but humanity's vigil had just begun.